What's going on, YouTube? And welcome back to Goal Line Hockey, coming to you live from Long Island, New York. It is Kevin Forte coming to you today on this beautiful Saturday afternoon here on the East Coast. And today we are going to talk about some of the things that went down over the last few days. Of course, there's no hockey right now, at least NHL game action, as right now they are in the NHL's All-Star break. And there's not a ton of actual hockey coverage, but we did have a couple of trades this week, two of the big ones being out in Winnipeg and Vancouver. We'll be discussing the guys moving around, new faces and new places. As guys, we are just over a month away from the NHL's trade deadline. So we'll be looking at Lindholm going to Vancouver, Monahan going to Winnipeg. A lot of rumors right now about a defenseman that, yeah, this isn't deja vu. This is another trade for Jakob Chychrun. Seems like it will be imminent at some point here between now and March 1st, I think it is this year. Whenever the trade deadline is. Adam Henrique's name has been thrown around as well. There's a lot of suitors for Adam Henrique, so we'll be talking about that. And we'll also be discussing the latest on Anthony Duclair, or as they call him, Duke, out in San Jose. There's a lot of trade rumors around Anthony Duclair, so we'll be discussing all of that today. Guys, if you're in this stream today, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you guys joining us here. Your time is very valuable. I understand that. So if you're taking the time out of your afternoon here to talk hockey, I really do appreciate that so much. You guys are the best. I know things are a little difficult right now with the streaming and my content not being out as much as I'd like, but if you would like some more updates on that, I posted that in last week's live stream, the Flyers Bruins stream. So if you'd like some more information on that, instead of me repeating that for the people that already know that, go and check out that stream if you have not already. Also, let me know where you guys are watching from today. Let me know what state, what country. Let me know where you guys are watching from today. All right, so let's take a look at the chat. So thank you for joining us today. PJ, our member in the chat. If you would like to become a member, I will shout you out every live stream. So make sure, if you would like to support the channel, become a member today. So thank you to PJ, Wayne Train, what's going on, Dad? Thank you for joining us. Mario Vaccarella, thank you for joining us as well. Thank you guys so much. So PJ said, Kev, thoughts on the Lindholm trade? We'll be getting to that in a second. I witnessed his last goal before he got traded. Kev, that Flames jersey would look awesome on you. We'll see, PJ. We'll see. I'm wearing the Jordan Eberle jersey because this jersey might be irrelevant here in the not-so-distant future, as there is reports that Jordan Eberle could be on his way out of Seattle before the deadline. Thank you, Mario. I appreciate that. Hey, there's some real Emmons coming in from BC, Canada. And you know what? That's a perfect transition from BC, Canada, because we are going to be looking at the Vancouver Canucks acquiring Elias Lindholm from their crosstown rival Calgary Flames in a pretty big package. So that's the first trade to get us off the ground today. So, yeah, this deal, there's a lot. So I'm going to break it down for you as best as I can. I wanted to make the template for it, but I ran out of time. Like I said, guys, it's been crazy here. With everything going on this week, it is only the beginning. For the next 17 weeks, it is going to be hell for me. So I'm going to do my best. But with what we've got, this is what we have. So the Elias Lindholm trade. Vancouver Canucks, Elias Lindholm. In exchange, the Calgary Flames acquire forward Andrei Kuzmenko, the signing rights to Yoni Yormu, Hunter Brucerevics, I cannot pronounce that name, I apologize, I definitely butchered that. A conditional 2024 first round pick, that's Vancouver's pick. A 2024 conditional fourth round pick, also Vancouver's picks. The conditions on that pick, so the first round condition is the fourth round, so it is a 2024 first round pick from Vancouver. So Vancouver's first round pick this year will be going to Calgary. No questions. Okay? The fourth round pick, there are two conditions on that pick. The first condition, the 4th round pick becomes a 3rd round pick, which is also Vancouver's, if the Canucks make it to the conference finals. So the Canucks have to make it to the Western Conference final. That 4th round pick turns into a 3rd round pick. Now there's also another condition on that pick. If the pick remains a 4th round pick, Calgary will receive the better of the 2 picks that Vancouver currently owns, which is either the Vancouver Canucks 4th round pick or the New Jersey Devils 4th round pick. So whichever one is the higher of those 4th round picks, if the Canucks do not make it to the conference finals, that will be the highest pick going to Calgary. Okay, so let's break it down a little more because now there's a lot of players involved in this deal. So Hunter Brzustrevics, I think that's how you pronounce it. So the Michigan native, he's 19 years old. He was a 3rd round pick from the Vancouver Canucks back in 2023. And he is currently playing in the OHL with the Kitchener Rangers. So there was 2 seasons in the OHL. Last season, he had 57 points in 68 games. And he was basically an assist per game. So he definitely gets a lot of apples. He's a playmaker. And this season so far, very similar story. But his numbers are off the charts. He was less than a point per game last season. He is well over a point per game this season. He's already got 8 goals this season in 48 games. But that's not the glaring stat. It's the assists. This kid has 61 assists so far this season. So again, he might be the next apple tree out in Calgary because he picks up a ton of assists. He has 69 points already in 48 games. So he already has 10 more points than last season in 20 less games. That is crazy. He's putting up some incredible numbers right now. So keep an eye out for Hunter Brzustrevics. That is one of the guys that a lot of people are watching for. And mind you, he is a right shot defenseman putting up those numbers. Also, the guy that everyone really talks about in this deal, it's Andrei Kuzmenko for Calgary. There's a team in Calgary that isn't tearing it down from the studs. So what you have to remember here is because Calgary isn't doing a full-on rebuild, they are looking to keep guys around, right? They want players on the roster, and Kuzmenko perfectly fits that bill. Now, everybody's already saying, well, they're going to probably flip him again at the deadline. Why not wait till next year? They have another year. He'll be a UFA next year. And you know what? If he's getting really good minutes, top 6 minutes in the NHL with the Calgary Flames, with some of their younger guys, they'll probably be able to package him up for something even better at next year's deadline. So if I'm the Calgary Flames here, you might want to keep this guy around. See what he does for you. And if he does want to stay in Calgary, we know how many guys really like leaving Calgary. If there's a guy that genuinely wants to be a Calgary Flame, if I'm the Flames, try and see if you could get a deal done with Kuzmenko this summer. And maybe things work out and you have a guy that you really like and you have him long term. So that's something to watch for. So Kuzmenko fits that bill, right? 27 years old. He'll be a UFA next year. He's got a modified no-trade clause, a 12-team no-trade list. That carries into next season as well. And looking at his numbers, of course, last season, he had some really good numbers in Vancouver. He had 74 points in 81 games. So there's a guy that can produce. He had 40 goals last year. He can score goals, and that's something Calgary really needs. But he's kind of gotten off to a slow start this year. He only has 21 points through 40 games, so he's on pace at this rate. He's on pace for 40 points this season. So, Vancouver is kind of selling this guy for lower value than probably from what they would have got for him last offseason. So this could be something where they're kind of getting a lot of, Calgary's getting a lot of magic beans here, right? A first-round pick, a third-round pick, a former third-round pick with Brzustrevics. You're getting a lot of magic beans. And because they got a bunch of them that are fairly good quality, as long as one or two of them pop off to some extent, Calgary will win this trade in the future. And I think that's why a lot of Calgary Flames fans were very happy with what they got in return here. Kevin Conroy could have waited till a little closer to the deadline, tried asking more teams what deals are on the table. But you know what? Vancouver is also in the market looking for somebody. So the longer you wait, the less they're going to say, you know what? for 3 months of Elias Lindholm, is it really worth it for us to give up this many assets? Well, now that you got that deal done in the beginning of February, now it's a lot more likely that they'll make that deal work. There's a lot less irons on the fire. There's a lot less competition. We know between now and the deadline, a lot of deals are going to be put out there, very close to completion, and then fall through. As you guys know, this is how it runs every year. So I think for Calgary, it was they got the value they wanted, and they just said, you know what, instead of playing these little back and forth pity games, let's just get the deal done. Let's figure out how we can make terms work here. And that's exactly what they did. And they got the value that they wanted. Now, on the other side of things, for Vancouver, this is a deal that if they get to the conference finals or the cup final, or maybe they even win a cup. I know. For Vancouver fans, they're laughing at me right now because the even thought that they could win the cup this year is so blasphemy to them, and I understand that. But let's put it this way, if they make it to the conference finals this year and give themselves a chance, it was well worth the deal. Do they need another first-round pick? Every team would like to have the luxury of another first-round pick, but they're done collecting those, right? They have a ton of those. They have Niels Höglander. They have all these young prospects and developing guys. They've got them already. Let's see what we could do with another top 6 player alongside Elias Pettersson, alongside some of the talent they already have there. And I would definitely say this reminds me a lot, to kind of bring this back for my Canucks fans out there. This is very similar to the inverse of the Bo Horvat trade, in the sense that at this point, Arttu Räty, Anthony Beauvillier no longer there, the first-round pick. It doesn't seem like that good of a trade right now. And it kind of seems like at this point, yeah, the Islanders definitely overpaid in terms of the long-term contract, but I would rather be the Islanders right now in that Bo Horvat trade than what Vancouver got. So you have to kind of look at it being the inverse here, where you're acquiring that player rather than trading it away with Elias Lindholm. So there's a lot that I would like about this deal for both sides, but this is one of those things where if Vancouver wins the cup this year, they won this trade. And if Elias Lindholm leaves in free agency, who cares? You've got a cup ring alongside that. So that's kind of how you have to look at this deal. And I think it's one of those things where if Calgary can just get one of those guys to pan out, they'll be okay. So Mario said, we missed you. Thank you. Yes, Surreal from BC. I'm in BC right now as well. So shout out to my BC Canadians out there. A bunch of you guys here in the chat. Raiden Burst, thank you for joining us, said Kuzi and Sharky, that Russian connection, spicy. Yes, that's true. That's another really interesting point, because it's one of those things with this group right now where Calgary is looking a lot different than they did last year, right? You look at all the guys that have left that team, have come into that team, and it seems like they are going with that Russian influence on this team a little bit. And I like that. I think that's a different blend from what we've seen from Calgary, right? Because Calgary's always been known for like who they still have, right? Like guys like Mikael Backlund and Mark Giordano and those sort of guys. And Jerome McGinley. This is definitely a different type of Calgary team, and I'm all for it. I think the new ownership there, the new direction, the management, the new GM, Kevin Conroy, definitely gaining a lot of good praise from the fans this week. And considering how things went last year with Gaudreau and Tkachuk and some of those trades, he's definitely taken a lot of criticism, but I think he did a really good job here. PJ saying, I wouldn't sign Kuzmenko. It depends, right? Like, if the deal is right, if maybe you get him for like another 2-year extension for like $3 million per year, would you do that? That might be something worth taking. Again, I'm sure Kuzmenko and his agent are going to do their due diligence to see what's out there, what's available on the market. But that's just part of playing ball, right? Kev, with Jacob Chikrin reportedly on the move, if I'm the Flames, I look to trade for him. That's interesting. The only problem with that right now, PJ, I wonder if it's got to be a sign and trade, because Calgary can't afford to trade for him and then he doesn't end up staying with the team this summer. So that's kind of where, when you get into those UFA categories with especially a team like Calgary, you got to really be careful with that. I'd want to make sure I have some kind of certainty with Chikrin. before I make that deal work. I don't think it's a bad idea. I would just want the stability and the future side of it in a deal. But that'll be definitely interesting to keep an eye on. Mario said, I respectfully disagree, PJ. The Flames have done well with Yegor Sharangovich. I hope I spelled it right. So why not keep Andrei Kuzmenko? I hope that I also spelled that right. Yeah, a lot of the Russian influence there. I think the Flames can retool on the fly. Let me know if you can agree. Yeah, I think the Flames will retool on the fly. If they really think they can make the playoffs next year, if you could sign Chychrun to a longer term extension this year at the deadline, definitely make that deal. I just think there's going to be teams out there that will take him as a rental, and I think that's going to outweigh what Calgary would be able to put up for him. Again, if it's a player they really, really like and they're willing to pay it up, they might do it. I just don't know. I'm not necessarily sure yet what the market is for Chychrun. I would look to trade Hanifin for a top 6 forward if possible. Yeah, I mean, that's got to get figured out. I think that discussion's going on right now during the All-Star break, because Calgary needs to figure out what's going on with Hanifin. You cannot let Hanifin walk for nothing this summer. And the fact that they haven't gotten a deal done yet, I think that's done. I think they need if he is not signed this week, expect him to be traded, because I think there's just too much riding on Hanifin's value. You cannot let him go for nothing. And with where Calgary is right now, you got to really make sure he's committed fully if you really wanted to do that. And 38, Grimers, thank you for joining us. Grimmers, thank you for joining us. Flames get Connor McDavid. That will not happen. But crazier things have happened, so we'll see. Listen, if Wayne Gretzky can get traded, anybody can get traded. That's how I look at it. So, and I could sit here and say that's stupid and never going to happen. Never say never. And thank you to a bunch of you guys joining us. Let me know where you are watching this stream from in the comments down below. Where are you watching from today? PJ said, 38, you're a fan of what team? So you guys are going off in the chat. I love that. You guys are the best. Okay, so if you guys want to talk about the Lindholm trade more, we can. But I think we've kind of covered most of the bigger topics for that deal. You know, obviously Calgary is a seller at this point. Going into the deadline, Vancouver is obviously a buyer. And that's probably Vancouver's big deal that they made. I don't see them. Maybe they make one more trade, like a smaller depth piece. But I don't see them going big, right? I don't see them trading their first round pick next year. They already traded their second round pick, right? So they at this point, they only have, in terms of draft picks, they still have their third round pick this year. But that's it pretty much. So they're going to be very selective with what trades they make the rest of the way. All right, so let's move on to the Sean Monahan trade. And shout out to, if there's any Habs fans in here, Talking Habs. He's a really cool guy. He's come into the comment section before. I've gone onto his channel, talking to him a couple times. Really cool guy. He had a great breakdown of the Monahan trade. They're very happy with what they got. Similar to Calgary, the market is really tough right now for buyers because, you know, what we're seeing right now with Lindholm going for that price and Monahan going for a first-round pick, that is really going to make the market difficult for the buyers. They're going to have to pay up a lot. And, so let's take a look at that trade. So the Winnipeg Jets acquire Sean Monahan for Montreal, who acquires a first-round pick in 2024. That's Winnipeg's pick. And a conditional 2027 third-round pick, which is also Winnipeg's. The condition is Montreal receives the 2027 third-round pick if Winnipeg wins the 2024 Stanley Cup. So that pick, that third-round pick, is only if Winnipeg wins the Cup in 2024. So that's a shot in the dark, but if Winnipeg wins the Cup, it'll be a first and a third to Montreal. So Sean Monahan this season, in his time in Montreal, his numbers have been pretty good. Things didn't start off overly great in Montreal, if you guys remember. You know, he had a tough career end in Calgary. Things did not go well. But we're starting to see the the emergence again of Sean Monahan, which is really nice to see. I love seeing those comeback stories. That's definitely the case here with Sean Monahan. So his last season in Calgary back in 2021-22, he put up 23 points in 65 games. Last season in Montreal, he had 17 points in 25 games. And then this season, he already has 13 goals in 50 games and 35 points. So his numbers have been pretty good. You could argue if that's worth a first-round pick or not, but on a bad Montreal team, it's pretty good numbers. And if he stays at this pace, he's going to be on pace for, if he's playing on a good team like Winnipeg, probably 60 to 70 points this season, potentially ceiling-wise 70. That's really good. And, for Montreal, I think they got a lot here. Getting a first-round pick from Monahan, I think, is a very, very nice package. And thank you for joining the channel here, 38 Grimmers. Liked and subscribed. So thank you so much for joining us. So that's kind of what we're looking at here with the Monahan deal. Is it the best deal ever for Winnipeg? No. But again, they're trying to win a cup, right? So again, similar to Vancouver, if they go on a run, if they go to the Western Conference Final, we forget that this deal was a bad deal, right? And they end up doing pretty well. Montreal could really win this trade. If they get a middle-of-the-road first-round pick in this, like they pick 15 to 20, and that ends up being a pretty good player, well, Winnipeg's probably going to regret this trade in 5 or 6 years. But for now, Winnipeg's going for it, right? They're having an incredible season. And you know what? More so than anything, and people forget this because they get so caught up in the value, this is Kevin Cheveldayoff rewarding his team. Kevin Cheveldayoff is seeing how good that team is playing. They've been at the top of the Central Division most of the season, right? Toward the top of the NHL standings. He's rewarding his players, right? This is positive reinforcement. Listen, you guys are playing great. Keep it up, and I'm going to reward you guys for your really good effort and your really good execution. You're winning games, and this is what you get in return. And, right now he kind of slots in on that second line. You've got Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, and Gabe Vilardi. That's your top line. Your second line, you got Cole Perfetti, Monahan, and Ehlers. I think it just adds more stability down the middle, and I think that's a really good thing here. It puts a little bit less pressure on Cole Perfetti, especially some of those younger centers in the league. Perfetti definitely being one of them. Let him play the wing a little bit, right? Let him develop. Let him develop on the wing, take some of the responsibility of that center role off of him, get his game going, and I have to make this very clear. I think Cole Perfetti is going to be one of the next, Patrice Bergeron-esque centers in the league, but he's still young. He's still very, very young. His second NHL season. Let the kid develop on the wing. Sean Monahan's playing well. You slot him in on the second line, and now that adds stability down in your bottom six. You've got Lowry, Appleton, Morgan Barron, Nemesnikov, and Iafallo. Perfect. I wouldn't mind seeing another depth addition for Winnipeg. So don't be too surprised if they make another forward addition there. Defense is really solid. That's one of the strong points of the Jets. Josh Morrissey, DeMello, Pionk, Dillon, Sandberg, and Schmidt. I love that defense. I think that's one of the reasons they are doing so well. It was just a matter of time before this team really broke out onto the scene and really got going. So I'm not terribly surprised that this team is finally getting things going. And when you've got Connor Hellebuyck in between the pipes, you have a chance every single night. I don't care how bad your team is. Goalies like Hellebuyck are very, very few. They're a diamond in the rough, and he is huge for this team, and I definitely want to make sure I mention that. So what else are you guys spouting off here in the chat? I think Vegas is fully healthy, beats the Oilers again in a playoff series. Yeah, I would love to see that again. Those teams hate each other. I would love to see that. Kev, who won the trade? Again, PJ, I hate doing this stuff. You know me well enough. It's hard for me to predict winners and losers the day before. Listen, if Vancouver or Winnipeg wins the cup this year, they win. And nobody gives a crap if they won the trade or not. They won the cup. And that's really the mindset you have to have for these things. If they go on a run, if they go to the conference finals, if they go to the cup final, right? Even I look at the Islanders in 2020 and 2021. Yeah, did I really love, the trades they made, picking up Travis Zajac and some of the trades they made? No. But they went to the conference finals and were one win away from the Stanley Cup final 2 years in a row. So did they really lose those trades? Yeah, I'm sure the Devils are happy with the prospects they got from the Islanders, but the Islanders had some good runs in there. And that's kind of the mindset. You have to be realistic with this. I think that's how you have to look at this. You have to set your expectations in reality, okay? You are the best YouTuber ever. So 38 Grimmers coming in here and just throwing bombs. Absolutely love that. Thank you so much, Grimmers. Really glad to have you joining the channel. Mario said, I think that the Flames are going to be extra careful after Johnny Hockey Gaudreau did a bit of a John Tavares. Sorry to bring it up, Kevin. I know that you're an Islanders fan analogy. And yeah, Mario, I know you understand that because you're from Long Island, like you mentioned. This is how it works, right? Like, the reality is, the Islanders and the Flames, I know that they're upset with Johnny Gaudreau. I know they're upset with Tavares. You should never allow the player to have that much control. The Islanders fully could have traded Johnny Gaudreau. The Flames fully could have traded Johnny Hockey. That is mismanagement by the GM. That's all it is. You could be mad at the player for saying that they wanted to stay and this and that. At the end of the day, it was poor management, poor asset management by the GM. That's why Garth Snow is no longer with the Islanders, and that's part of the reason that Brad Treliving, oh crap, is that his name? Who was the former GM of the Flames? Was it Brad Treliving? That's why those guys are no longer GM of the team. So you could be mad at the players all you want. I totally understand that. Yes, the booing, this and that, totally get it. It's the GM screwing up. So I'll leave it at that. But yes, I think that's a very good point, Mario, and a great comparison. I think that Montreal did like Chicago on the Fleury deal, but the difference was the return was unknowns for Vezina winner. Yeah, I did like Chicago, but the difference was the return was unknowns for Vezina winner. Yeah, that's the thing. When you throw just 5 or 6 assets and you're just hoping something sticks at the wall, but there's no real value in those assets. Like, if you got 8 years of second-round picks, well, that's great, but are those guys going to be any good? Maybe. And I think that's a bad analogy. Let's say you got 10 fourth-round picks. All right, so you got 10 prospects, but they're fourth-round picks. Wouldn't you have rather gotten 1 first-round pick instead of 4 10th-round picks? Right? Or, you know what I mean, right? 10 fourth-round picks, right? You have to change the way you value it, but that's kind of how you have to look at it. Raiden Burst, again coming in, said, best rule, if you can't sign an expiring player, sell him ASAP. So Flames did good for someone they'd lose. Yes. And it also, again, and I think Raiden Burst is just not saying this, but that's part of the analysis here. You have to judge whether your team is a playoff team or not, right? If you truly believe that your team can make the playoffs, then by all means, if you have a guy that you're going to get a 4th-round pick for anyway at the deadline, keep him as your own rental. So instead of getting a 4th-round pick, you're just keeping that guy and not getting a 4th-round pick. You know what I'm saying? You got to kind of look at it in that sense too, where if you're at the deadline and let's say you're just outside a wild card spot, like 2 points out, but you have 2 games on hand, you can play 2 more games than the team that's in a wild card spot. Well, you're probably judging, well, that could potentially be 2 or 4 points we're getting that we can make the playoffs. So instead of, could I use the 4th-round pick for trading this guy? But I'd rather go on a playoff run, right? And we have a bunch of veterans on this team. I'm going to let them make this run, and I'm going to put the trust in the players, this veteran group, that they can get it done. And instead of getting a 4th-round pick for this guy, I'll keep him around. And again, this also comes back to the team's going to also know that. The locker room morale is going to be like, wow, our GM just traded this guy for a 4th-round pick that was a good glue guy, a good locker room guy, and that's going to hurt our chances of making the playoffs. And God forbid there's an injury down the stretch, they miss the playoffs by 1 or 2 points, well, they could be saying, well, that guy you got for a 4th-round pick, Maybe we would have made the playoffs if he was on the roster, right? So these are all the things that GMs are thinking about that you kind of have to have in the back of your head. And that's really important to remember going into this trade deadline is everybody's going to be saying, trade this guy, trade that guy, trade that guy. Totally understand. If you're a bottom dweller like Chicago was last year or potentially Montreal is going to be this year, trade the farm. Trade everybody out. Do what you got to do. But if you're still in the running for a playoff spot, you have to sometimes decide whether it's worth letting your guys play and let them make the playoffs and have enough trust in them, because when that guy's contract is due in a year or two from now, he's going to remember, yeah, you know what, this GM believes in us. Yeah, you know what, we might have got to the playoffs or not, but he doesn't sell at the deadline every year. And when you become a team that sells at the deadline every year, 2000s Edmonton Oilers, nobody wants to re-sign with you because it's just a continuing cycle every year. And at some point, you have to be willing to buy or just stay pat. And that's really important. And we have a bunch of you guys here in the chat. Let's go, baby. You guys are killing it. Thank you so much for joining us here. We have a bunch of you guys joining in. So, like I said, guys, I'll try and answer as many of these as I can. But because the chat is firing off, if you would like to guarantee that I answer your question, leave a super chat and I will answer you right away. But I'll try and get through as many of these as I can. So Jeremy Lausanne, the next big trade for Montreal, did they Will stole the show at Vegas this year? Sorry for my English. I'm from Quebec. I appreciate that, Jeremy. And yes, thank you for joining us. So the next big trade for Montreal. So, okay. So Montreal... Let's look at their roster right now. So the Montreal Canadiens are a team right now that, like we mentioned, with where they are in the standings, in all honesty, they're not a playoff team this year. So don't be surprised if we see another similar situation to the Monahan trade, where they're going to be selling guys off, right? Maybe trading guys for some depth draft picks and prospects, very similar to the Monahan deal. I apologize. My computer is very old and very slow, so I'm going to try and do the best here, so stay with me. But, if you're looking at any guys like in their mid-30s, let's say anybody that's over the age of 30 that's on an expiring contract in Montreal, they're probably thinking to themselves, I'm probably going to get traded at the deadline. And, so looking at the roster here, as I'm trying to stumble across here, here we go. It's loading up now. Okay. So we have got, okay. So perfect example for Montreal. So Tanner Pearson, right? Tanner Pearson is 31 years old. He's a UFA this summer. They're probably going to trade him. Unless they have a deal probably coming up to keep him around, he's probably going to get traded. And what's even better is he has no trade protection. So he had a no trade and a modified no trade. He has 8 points in 30 games. They're probably going to ship him out for a middle of the draft pick. So that's not necessarily a big move, but Tanner Pearson, more likely than not, probably going to be on his way out. Jake Allen has 2 years left on his deal. If a team's looking to add a 33-year-old goalie, maybe they're willing to do that. His price is a little high, so maybe not. Who else is here? They really don't have much. So Tanner Pearson right now would be the guy I'm looking at. I've also heard stuff about potentially Christian Dvorak's name being thrown around in Montreal. So keep an eye out for that. You know, his contract is a little high, but he's 28 years old. Yoel Armia is another one I would watch for. But if I was a betting man today, Tanner Pearson is definitely the one I'm watching for. If I'm a Montreal Canadiens fan, I would say with 99% certainty, Pearson will be gone. Other than that, Yoel Armia and Christian Dvorak are the other two I would be watching for. So what other questions do you guys have here? So Key Boomerang said Ehlers and Perfetti production will explode. The only negative point on Monahan is the injuries. Jets are closer to the cup. I'm sure the Western Conference are on the panic mode now. Habs fan. I'm sure the Western Conference are on the panic mode now. Yeah. So I think it's one of those things with Winnipeg where this is like I said, it's really coming down to rewarding the players for what they've done. They've played really well this season. They're right toward the top of this NHL standings, and they're rewarding the players with a good morale boost. And yeah, that's the thing with Monahan, right? You're trading a first-round pick and potentially a third-round pick for a guy that is injury-prone. And that is the big concern. His production has been good this year, but if he gets hurt, you're giving up a first-round pick and potentially a guy that might not even be on your roster in the playoffs. So that's obviously the doom and gloom scenario, but I think that Winnipeg was willing to take that risk. They like what they've seen from him this season, right? They've obviously done a little bit of scouting, I would hope, before trading a first-round pick for this guy. But that's kind of what we're looking at. Mario also said, I still hear complaints about Amont and Gardner, who I liked, but the Rangers got a Stanley Cup in '94. Well worth the trades. Mario, exactly, right? That's what people have to remember is and you're going to see this with Elias Lindholm. If he does not re-sign with Vancouver, they are going to be pissed. Oh, we traded a prospect, Kuzmenko, and a first-round pick for this guy that doesn't want to be here. Guys, like that is part of the game. When you are trading for an asset that is not signed to a long-term contract, they are not obligated to sign there. There are sign-in trades today. They could have signed him before the deadline. Guys, you cannot blame the player for that. It comes down to the management, right? And that's why I hate all the fans that go after these players and their families and attack them. You can't do that. There's no reason for that, right? The player has that right. The CBA, the NHL Players Association, is lined up where players have the ability, if they do not want to sign somewhere, they are not obligated to. Right? That's just what you have to think about. And in the long run, you have to think, do I really want to invest, right, $10 million per season into a guy that doesn't really want to be here anyway? That's how you have to look at it. Raiden Burst said, yeah, from seeing the Flames trends, the sell was right because they aren't likely to make the playoffs. Right. Exactly. Mario said again, therefore, you're right about if a trade gets you a cup, it's a win, even if the better players left, right? And this is a famous quote from Brian Burke, right? He said, last time I checked, they only hand out one Stanley Cup each year. So every team, right, at the top of the standings, the top 10 teams in the NHL standings, all trade their first-round picks. But 9 of those teams are going to lose those trades because they didn't win the cup, right? But that's the value of winning the Stanley Cup, is all these teams are willing to trade what it takes to win a Stanley Cup. And, obviously we know from Brian Burke, much more conservative approach. If there's a guy he really wants, he'll make the deal, but he's not going out there selling the farm, trading 5 of his top, draft picks, and then seeing what happens, right? Jeremy again said, what do you think about the Habs will do this year at the draft? With all of their choice, could they make a Kirby Dach trade? Yeah, that's right. I think that's another thing too. Kirby Dach, Christian Dvorak, Yoel Armia. Those 3 guys would be guys, if I'm looking at, they might be shopping those guys at the deadline, talking shop with some teams. If they don't get something done at the deadline, don't be surprised if one of them maybe moves out over the summer, because the Habs are going to be bringing in a lot of younger players this summer. Those guys they've been drafting the last year or two, they're going to be in the NHL. They're going to get NHL jobs this season and next, so they're going to want to see what they have there. Some of those guys are going to move on. Yeah, so I could see that. Like I said, the Habs are a team that could be kind of quiet at the deadline. But like I said, I think it's going to be more they're going to be priming themselves for this summer and what trades they could potentially make. What else do we want to talk about? So we mentioned a little bit earlier, Jacob Chychrun. Jacob Chychrun's going to be interesting. Because, like I said, we were here last year, right? Very much deja vu. Jacob Chychrun is back on the trade market. A lot of teams are in the mix for Chychrun again. expect similar teams to what we heard last year, right? I've heard Detroit, St. Louis. We know they were really, really close to a deal with the St. Louis Blues last year. The Los Angeles Kings could be in that conversation again, depending on how things go. But Jacob Chychrun has one more year left on his deal. So I think the mentality for Ottawa is, instead of trading him as a UFA, as a rental next year, if we trade him with 2 years left on his contract, well, we're going to get a lot more value for him. And I think that's the mentality that they have. They see that maybe things aren't working out so well with them and Chychrun's maybe not fully committed there. Chychrun's kind of fired back and said that's not true. So there's a lot of back and forth. We'll see how things pan out, but his name has been thrown around again. Adam Henrique, definitely one that I'm watching for. And if the Islanders stay in the playoff run, I know Lou Lamoriello loves his former Devils. Adam Henrique could be in the running for the Islanders. He could be in the running for the Rangers, the Devils, the Avalanche, the Predators. All those teams are going to be in the conversation for Adam Henrique. I could list off probably half the league is going to at least be talking to Anaheim about Adam Henrique. Same thing for Anthony Duclair. Anthony Duclair is out in San Jose, and he's ripping it up. He's been playing very well there. Another guy, again, maybe he's getting more minutes than he would on a contender, and maybe his value's a little bit less than that. The Sharks already have some good draft capital. They have a pair of first-round picks this year. They have a pair of second-round picks this year as well. So they have some draft capital at the top of the draft, and they're going to look to exploit adding more of that. The Sharks are really going to be interesting. And I don't know if Shaka's going to be joining us today, one of our pretty big supporters here on the channel. But looking at the Sharks right now, they've got Kevin Labanc, 28-year-old UFA. Mike Hoffman, 34-year-old UFA. Anthony Duclair, 28-year-old UFA. Alexander Barbanov, 29-year-old UFA. Who else? That's pretty much it. And maybe Capo Kakinen, if there's any value there. They are going to be a team to watch. San Jose and Calgary on the West Coast, definitely teams to watch for in terms of being big sellers at the deadline. And some of the teams that have been mentioned for Anthony Duclair, San Jose has been talking to Edmonton, Colorado, and Vegas. So it seems like he could be staying on the West Coast. And maybe some of the Eastern Conference teams haven't really seen much of Anthony Duclair yet. Maybe that's part of the reason there's specifically a lot of West Coast teams there. But as we get closer to the deadline, maybe we'll hear a little bit more about some other teams being in the mix for Anthony Duclair. He is making $3 million this year, though, so that might make things a little bit more difficult. And he does have 17 points in 46 games, so he might go for a second or third round pick, depending on how things go. Again, with the market, with the way it looks right now, a second or third round pick seems pretty likely for Duclair. What are some other things we've got here? So, let me see if I could get here. Oh, so there's another one. So this is from Kevin Weeks. So he was saying the other day that he wonders if there's a chance that Claude Giroux ends up back in Philadelphia. That would be kind of interesting. So that was a report from Kevin Weeks the other day. Another one from David Pagnotta said the Predators likely want 2 first-round picks and a top prospect and a 4th asset for UC Saros. So if you're looking to acquire UC Saros, it's going to cost you a pretty penny, as it should, though. UC Saros is a very good goalie. So keep an eye out for that. Another one here from Nick Kyprios. He said the Penguins offered Jake Gensel somewhere around 6 years at $8.5 million per season, but were rejected. So keep an eye out for Jake Gensel. I don't think it's a money situation with Jake Gensel. It's more a sense of, is he seeing the writing on the wall for the Penguins, right? You know, Letang, Malkin, Crosby, their contracts are coming up in the next 2 years. Does Jake Gensel want to give up the next decade of his career to a rebuilding Penguins team? I don't think so. So I think, truthfully, he's probably going to be gone. He will be traded by the deadline by the Penguins and will make my jersey irrelevant. I think Gensel going to Vancouver is probably dead now that they traded for Lindholm. That was a big rumor for the last couple of months. But don't be surprised if teams start coming at Pittsburgh for Jake Gensel. David Pagnotta said the Calgary Flames have been linked to Colton Parayko ahead of the deadline. So again, maybe looking for some term, right? Kind of like the Chychrun situation. Parayko, similar thing, 2-3 years left on their deal. Colton Parayko's name has been linked to Calgary, right? Trying to add some more beef and size to that blue line. This is a big one from Darren Drager. He said the Rangers are taking trade calls on Kaapo Kakko ahead of the deadline. So that's a big one. If the Rangers are to trade Kakko, I think that's going to be something more so that'll come up at the summer. I don't think the Rangers are again, the fact that there's no, like, you know how we talked about with UC Saros, where there's an actual structure of a price. That deal for UC Saros is a lot closer, I think, than Kaapo Kakko, but they are talking. There's a germination of an idea that we could see Kaapo Kakko get traded, so keep an eye out for that. On a lesser note, definitely less than Kaapo Kakko and Saros, Elliot Friedman said Tyler Johnson has been linked to the Rangers ahead of the deadline, so maybe there's some kind of connection there. Maybe there's Kaapo Kakko in some type of deal for Tyler Johnson. Obviously not one for one, but the starting of a package there. Elliot Friedman wonders if the Canucks look to trade Nikita Zadorov to clear up cap space. Again, if Vancouver maybe does go out and acquire some of those assets, that could be something that's on the table, right? And we know that they were looking at Kaapo Kakko last year, or Alexis Lafreniere, so don't be surprised if Patrick Allvin maybe takes a swing on another player here. David Pagnotta said the Winnipeg Jets and Toronto Maple Leafs have been linked to Alexander Barbanov. Again, you know, Jets and Leafs, second, third, fourth line center depth. Alexander Barbanov fits that quite well. The Toronto Maple Leafs and Oilers have been linked to Sean Walker, and that's from David Pagnotta. So again, a lot of names are out there, a lot of different guys being talked about. But yeah, it's one of those things right now. The situation around a lot of these teams is we're trying to figure out what guys are available, who's buyers, who's sellers, who's still staying and maybe waiting till like maybe another 2 weeks to see where they are. They're a bubble team, so they're not sure if they're a buyer or seller yet. So we're going to get more of an idea on that a little bit later. But a lot of teams are starting to, set up their pole position for where they're at. Raiden Burst said, I could see the Islanders or Boston showing some interest for Hannafin, perhaps still think he might be moving before March. Absolutely, Raiden Burst. I totally agree with that. Yeah, I think the Islanders are interesting. I think the Islanders need to make a deal. They don't have the assets anymore. And that's the problem with the Islanders is Lou's been trading all their first round picks, and the picks he's been making haven't really been working out so well. So they have their first and second round pick this year. They have their first, second, and third round pick next year. I'm not sold yet, but Lou could be willing to make a move. They don't have a ton of cap coming off the books this year either. The good news is they don't have anybody huge that they have to re-sign, which is a good thing. But right now you have Oliver Wahlstrom and Simon Holmstrom, Matt Martin and Casey Zizekas. Matt Martin and Cal Clutterbuck. And then on the back end, Mike Riley and Sebastian Aho. That's it. So the Islanders' situation on defense, you would like to see them add another defenseman. Again, they have $100,000 of cap space, so they got to move somebody out. And, when you talk about moving somebody out, their dead cap, they don't have. They don't have any dead cap space. So one of those things where it's going to have to be probably another depth defenseman. I wouldn't be surprised if they added somebody like that because their system is not great yet. Cale Odelius is a really good prospect, but he's 19 years old. Dennis Cholowski, I don't think he's going to come up. Paul Ledoux, Travis Mitchell, I don't see any of those guys coming up. Up front, again, I think this is going to be another approach by Lou where he doesn't have the cap space and he truly doesn't have the assets to make another Bo Horvat trade. I don't see it, but We will see what happens. Boston, I think, is interesting for Hannafin too. The Islanders really need a defenseman though, and that's the problem here. Is if they really want to make the playoffs, they almost have to make that type of move. But I don't know. I don't know if Calgary would be interested in that package. What else do we got? Do you agree with rumors that Jeff Gorton doesn't want to trade with the Rangers? Ask for more because they fired him. That Jeff Gorton doesn't want to trade with the Rangers. I could see that. I think that's a fair rumor. It's not necessarily a smart move by Gorton, but listen, he's entitled to whatever. I mean, I get it. It's kind of dumb and stupid, but there are a lot of GMs and coaches and scouts and things like that are kind of stupid sometimes. So maybe it is a little bit of a gripe. He might feel that way, and that does happen. I think the Habs and the Rangers are perfect trade partners, but I don't know if we're going to see it. And the fact that the Rangers are kind of selling at the deadline, potentially, makes things interesting. The thing with Kakko, I think the Rangers, if they're trading Kakko, they want an upgrade, right? Like, they're going to do something like... I haven't heard any rumors on this, but let's just say, hypothetical situation, okay? Let's say they trade for Jake Gensel, okay? Kaapo Kakko and a first-round pick with other assets for Jake Gensel. That's the starting package. And that's kind of what you're looking at. I think the Rangers aren't trading Kakko for a first-round pick, right? I just don't see that. I think they're going to use him as a stepping piece to a bigger trade for one big player. Because the Rangers they're playing ball, right? Like, they have gone to the conference finals the last couple years. They've gone on some runs. They are not content with missing the playoffs this year, for sure. Definitely not content with that. They're going to look to go on a run this year. But I am concerned about the Rangers because Shesterkin hasn't been playing all that well. He's kind of bouncing back, but not really, right? For the majority of this season, he's been kind of slow. Quickie kind of settled down to middle of the pack form. So they're overworking Quick, and Shesterkin just hasn't been himself. And I'm sure that Mario agrees with that. Kakko might even be a UFA this summer. Let me look at that just to check. Right, because he did sign a bridge contract already, did he not? I think Kaapo Kakko is already on his second deal. Like I said, it's a little slow. Okay, so Kaapo Kakko is an RFA this summer. He's 22 years old, making $2.1 million. So because of the way his contract was structured, he will not be a UFA in this current deal. But because he's 22 years old, I would assume that, let's say, okay, so if he signs a 2-year contract with his next team, whether that's the Rangers or anybody else, his next contract will probably be a 2-year deal. The number will still be fairly low because you're still buying restricted free agent years. The second they turn 25 or 26, now you're buying UFA years, and the dollar amount goes up tremendously. So if it's anything longer than a 2-year deal, let's say it's a 3, 4, 5. I don't see anything over that. A 3, 4, or 5-year deal, that number could be way higher because you're buying those years of UFA years compared to restricted free agency years. That is very valuable, especially with younger players like Kaapo Kakko. Because let's say he signs it. I'm not saying he's not going to do this. If he signed an 8-year contract, the Rangers are betting on Kaapo Kakko being a stud into 30 years old, right? And Kakko is also saying, well, listen, if I pop off for the next 8 years, well, I want some level of security. I want a $6-7 million per year start. Because if he's worth $10 million at 28, 29, 30 years old, he's going to want that value kind of balanced out throughout his contract. So, like I said, I don't think it's going to happen. I'm looking at a 2-year deal for Kakko if a team is a contender signing him, like the Rangers. But if he's going to maybe a rebuilding team that has more cap space, like San Jose, Chicago, Calgary maybe, they might be able to get something closer to... They might be able to get a longer term deal with a higher number per year, if that makes sense. And Mario said, at least Lou keeps these players. Try this end with the Chris Drury Rentals dealership. Yeah, I know, that's true. But again, it's one of those things where, again, I think that's maybe the lack of experience by Jeff Gorton there with that kind of move. That could be part of the thing with him, or Chris Drury, Chris Drury maybe not having as much management experience as Lou, right? Because there are very few in the business who have more experience than Lou. But yeah, I think again, a lot more teams should go into that. Like, is this guy going to sign with us, right? And you have to think of it from the player's perspective, right? If they're going to Calgary or Winnipeg, like, this guy's already coming in here thinking, I'm here for this spring and I'm out of here, right? And that's where you got to maybe talk to his agent and get some feelers. Like, does this guy have any level of interest in signing with us? And that's kind of how you have to look at it. Yes, you're welcome, Mario. I definitely, it's kind of complicated. I wish I had an easier way of saying it. But the easiest way to put it, and if you play the NHL games, this happens as well, right? Like, if you have a 22-year-old like Kakko, if you sign a 2-year deal at 24, 25 years old, the cap hit doesn't really go up that much. The second he turns 25, 26, 27, the salary per year goes up tremendously. Why? Because you're buying that unrestricted free agency years. So that's something really, really important to remember. Their value, they're in their prime at that point. They've got some years under their belt, and they have the freedom of unrestricted free agency. That's what you're buying when you sign guys at that age. So what else do you guys want to talk about here? And again, if you have not already, make sure to like, comment, and share this channel. I'm really trying to grow this channel as much as I can. Like I said, probably every Saturday afternoon, I'll try to do a live stream with you guys. There's obviously no NHL games going on this weekend with the All-Star break, so it's kind of more of a free-flowing, let's just kind of go with the trade deadline stuff, because that is going to be the topic du jour for the next 2 months, and we're just embracing it. We're just going with it because that's what everybody wants to talk about. So as you guys don't have a ton of questions, I'm going to kind of just go over some more rumors. The Oilers and Bruins have been linked to Ilya Lyubushkin out in Anaheim. So the Ducks, another team, probably going to be sellers. That's from David Pajnoda. What else do we have here? The Detroit Red Wings and New York Islanders have been linked to Frank Vatrano, and that's from David Pajnoda. Matthew Joseph is the type of player that the Winnipeg Jets might look at. But now that they added Monahan, I'm not sure if they'll look at Matthew Joseph as much, but that's another name in Ottawa to watch for. Matthew Joseph. He could be on his way out of Ottawa. Sean Walker definitely seems like a guy that could be moving. Tampa's been linked to him. The Buffalo Sabres might get a third-round pick if they opt to move Eric Johnson, and that's from Jason Moser. The Canadiens and Ottawa Senators have been linked to Jonathan Berggren. Jonathan Berggren is another one that's going to get a lot of attention. He's kind of struggled this season and a little bit of last season, but I think he's young enough where teams see a lot of potential in him, and I wouldn't be surprised if Lou went after Jonathan Berggren as well. I think the Islanders are the type of team that would do that. You know, maybe you do something where you like do a swap, like Oliver Wahlstrom for Jonathan Berggren. I would love to see something like that, just so those guys see new places, but we'll see what happens. And that's from David Pajnoda. The Anaheim Ducks have been linked to Philip Broberg on the market, so Philip Broberg's name back in the rumor mill, so we'll see what happens with that. Edmonton could be moving on from Philip Broberg. What else do we have? So Kuzmenko's already gone. Friedman said, I do think the Kings could move Kaliev if they found maybe a depth player with edge to replace him. So that's another guy to watch for, Arthur Kaliev. So there are a lot of names that we're going to be talking about over the next couple of months, or the next couple of weeks. David Savard could be a good defenseman for a trade for a cup contender. The only problem with David Savard, Jeremy, is the fact that he has a bigger contract, a lot of the contending teams are going to have a hard time. Like, Montreal is going to have to retain half his salary just to get him out the door. And that, in turn, Montreal is going to ask for more value for David Savard because they're retaining so much money, and that's where it's harder to get a deal done. So, let's just look. So, David Savard, right, he's got 2 years left at 3.5. So, let's just say, hypothetically, let's just say, for a conservative number, 15% of his salary Montreal retains. So let's just say, for easy numbers, let's say $500,000. So $1 million retained for this year and next. So that number comes down to $3,000 or $3 million per season for Savard this year and next year. $3 million this year, $3 million next year. So that's 15% of the salary. Now that's another asset that Montreal is going to ask for that team for David Savard. So David Savard's numbers at 33 years old. Let me see. Let me just look because I haven't really watched too much of Montreal this year. So he's got 11 points in 27 games. He's a -10, but that doesn't really seem to matter in the market because Monahan was a -10 and got a first-round pick. So let's just say they get a second and fourth-round pick for David Savard. That could happen if a team has the cap space. So let's go into the market. Let's just play David Savard trade time, okay? So if you guys have anything else you would like to talk about, let me know down below and I'll discuss something else. But so let's just say David Savard, okay, who has a little bit of cap space to work with. So the Islanders could go for David Savard. I cringe at the thought of that, but that is available. Tampa could look at David Savard, but I think the money is too high. Detroit could look at David Savard. Carolina. Florida. So there could be a couple of teams in the running for David Savard. But again, it comes down to, like, because then the game totally changes. If the price changes, let's say a team's willing, instead of 15% of his salary, 50% of his salary for a first-round pick. Well, first of all, if I'm Montreal, I'm doing that trade right away. A first-round pick for David Savard, okay, we'll keep the $1.5 million for the next 2 years. Take him. But now, there's a lot more teams that could be in the running at that point if the cap hit is that low for the next 2 seasons. And is that Shazam that I see in the chat? What's going on, Shazam? Big Kev, hope you're doing well, bro. Happy New Year. I really hope Lou doesn't deal our number 1 pick. Who am I kidding? Of course he will. Who do you think he will target with that number 1? So, of course, thank you so much, Shazam. Thank you for joining us again. Really nice talking with you again. My fellow Islander fan here in the chat. Okay. Realistically, the Islanders need a defenseman. And we were just talking about David Savard, which isn't necessarily the guy that I'd want, but I could see Lou doing that, right? It could be one of those things where Lou says, all right, 50% of his salary retained, first round pick, done. Or, and that seems more realistic because the Islanders don't have the assets to trade like the Horvat trade, where you trade your first round pick, the R2 Ratu of the deal, and a roster player. The Islanders don't have those players anymore. Now, if they were to do something like that, hypothetically, let's say they went to Calgary for Noah Hannafin, okay? I'd rather Noah Hannafin. So the Islanders would trade their first round pick, okay? First round pick gone. Now let's say a prospect. Please do not trade Ruslan Ishkov, but I think that's the guy that would have to go. First round pick, Ruslan Ishkov, and a roster player. And that could be, as much as I love Hudson Fasching, it could be Hudson Fasching. It could be Oliver Wahlstrom. I'd prefer it to be Oliver Wahlstrom, in all honesty. But one of those two guys. And then you get Noah Hannafin. I think that's a realistic situation. So we'll see how things go. I think the Islanders need to target a defenseman. They really need help at center. They have been terrible. Every game I've gone to, season ticket holder for the Islanders, every game I've gone to, they cannot win a damn faceoff. Even with Pajot, even with Horvat. And that's why I love to see the Islanders go for a guy like Adam Henrique. I think his price is going to be too high, though. There's too many teams that can get him. So I just don't think it's going to happen as much as I'd love to see him on the Islanders. But I look at Frank Vetrano, Adam Henrique. If you could get a guy, a middle six, middle of the draft pick for a guy like that, do it. And then trade your first round pick and I throw up in my face when I say this, but a first round pick and Ruslan Ishkov for Noah Hanifin. But you got to sign him long term. I want Noah Hanifin on a sign and trade. I'm not taking him as a rental. So that's how I kind of look at it. A Trayson, thank you for joining us, said, what's out there for potential center replacements for the Flames? Losing Lindholm helps with their retool, but losing a center that can play first-line minutes isn't easy. That's a very good question, a Trayson. So, looking no further than the Islanders, if the Islanders have to move cap space, Jean-Gabriel Pajot could be an interesting one there. He's making $5 million till 2026. I think that's a guy that Calgary could target. He's a good penalty killer. He's a pest, kind of a pain in the neck, a good back checker. I think Flames fans would like J.G. Pajot. Speaking of the Islanders. Ottawa, Matthew Joseph. He's been kind of a weird fit there because of the whole contract situation. We obviously know what happened there with, what's his name? I forgot his name. Shane Pinto. So, if they don't move on from Shane Pinto, I think Matthew Joseph could be another guy that Calgary looks at down the middle. Maybe not necessarily a first line center, but a guy that could fill out for the rest of the season. Okay, you get my drift there. Who else could be interesting? I'm trying to think of teams. I mean, San Jose, these are guys that maybe you don't want in terms of like a rental. But let me see if I could find him. Nico Sturm could be kind of interesting in San Jose. I don't know if they're willing to trade him, but maybe Nico Sturm. Another one in Montreal that I think is interesting, and I think Calgary was interested in him when he was available. Christian Fischer. No, not Christian Fischer. My bad. Christian Dvorak. Christian Dvorak, he's got 2 years left on his deal. He's got kind of a high salary, and Montreal might look to move that money a little bit. Keep an eye out for Christian Dvorak. I think that's another one. I've always liked him, even in his time in Arizona. I know things haven't gone well for him in his career, but you have to remember that they don't want to fill up too much because they've got Kadri, Backlund, Connor Zary, Yegor Sharangovich already down the middle. So you don't want to add too many centers there. And, you know, it's one of those things you're probably not going to see any of those guys move out too soon. Kadri's on a long-term deal. Backlund's on a deal till 2026. So, again, if you want to have guys like Sharangovich and Zary get into the lineup and play center, you're just not going to have that. But, like I said, the names I'm going to look at the top of my head, Pajot on the Islanders. He's got some term. Christian Dvorak, another guy. He's got some term. I would keep an eye out for that. Nico Sturm in San Jose. And I forgot the other one that I was thinking about. But those are the guys you would be kind of looking at. Again, centers, maybe a little bit older. Decent contract, but nothing too expensive. And, again, has term. That's what you're really looking at. And I think if Calgary wants to make that deal work, like the Islanders, the only way that deal is attractive is because the Islanders are unloading the $5 million Pajot contract. And Calgary could use that to their advantage as well. So keep that in mind. All right, we've been going for quite a while today, just over an hour. So I think we're going to leave it here. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like the stream, make sure to like it. If you really like it, you really like the channel, and especially going into the trade deadline, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Guys, as always, Thank you so much for watching us here today. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And I'll see you guys again next Saturday afternoon. Peace out, guys.